Hi Janeites, and welcome back to the What the Austen podcast, and welcome back to spooky season. Yay! Me and Martha are back to do another one of the Northanger Abbey horrid novels. So we do this every single year. We've done, what is this? Is this our fourth time doing it? Fourth time.
Yeah.
So we've done quite a few. We've had some very crazy reading experiences, and this one was no different, right, Martha? This was also unhinged.
Yeah, which is kind of what we were hoping for, but I think this took it to a level that I wasn't quite prepared for.
Yeah, that's the thing. Whenever we start, we're always excited for the level of unhinged we'll be going into. We're like, I hope it's crazy. I hope it's wild. And it always is. But yeah, this one was definitely, I think this one was an unhinged reading experience, whereas sometimes the actual story's more unhinged. But I feel like the actual reading experience of this one was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, there was a lot happening, a lot of jumping around, and then a massive big reveals in like the final chapter or two. So it was like, wait, what's happening now?
Yeah, the last chapter is totally wild. Was like that was so different than a lot of the other ones. We were kind of drip fed a lot of the answers as we went along, I felt, whereas this one, it was really rogue. The last chapter was just like, everything's on the table, this is exactly everything that's happened and who everyone is, and it was a bit of a whirlwind. I was quite jarred. I actually thought that I was missing the last chapter, and what I was reading was actually like some kind of conclusion that someone else had written. It's like a summary of the book. That's how jarring the last chapter was.
Yeah, I found that as well, because like you say, like in some of the other ones we read in like Udolpho and stuff, like you say, there's a lot of mysteries and they kind of get solved bit by bit as we go through. And there was kind of one mystery that got solved earlier on around like Madeline's dad, but actually most of it was like bam, final chapter. And yeah, it was a lot to process, and I kept being like, what's happening now?
Yeah, I feel like Regina had a lot of hope that we were very much like in tune with the characters by that point, but actually considering how much she changed people's names, that wasn't the case. So I had to keep rereading and like in my head pinpointing exactly who people were, because there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of unnecessary characters, and there's a lot of main characters whose name changes as we go along. So we'll try and make it as clear as possible for everyone when we work through it today, but that's whether or not it's clear in our heads as well, I think is the key. So the book that we're covering today is Clermont by Regina Marie Roche. So Regina was born in Ireland in 1764, and she's probably best known for her book The Children of the Abbey, which was published in 1796. The book that we're focusing on today is Clermont, which was published in 1798. And her first two novels, so The Children of the Abbey and Clermont, were actually published under her maiden name, which was Delton. Apparently Clermont was her only attempt at writing a Gothic novel. Something that I think is quite sad about this particular writer in this book is it was incredibly difficult for me and Martha to get hold of a copy, so we both ended up reading a PDF version that you can get. There's one on Google Books, and there's another one that I think the one that I read, which was on another platform that you could download. But this is not a book that you could just walk into, your local bookshop and get hold of. It's not one you'll find on Audible. And I personally couldn't find it on Kindle. I know Martha states a bit later on that she managed to find it somewhere. But yeah, this is not a book that's in mass print anymore. If in print at all, I couldn't find it. I even went into Persephone Books in Bath, and they also didn't stock it. And they specialise in keeping women authors who have gone out of publication, keeping them in print now and kind of bringing their books back. So I definitely, I'm going to email them after, I think, and just say to them, like, this is a really great book to have on your radar. It says here, in 1796, she suddenly sprang into fame with the publication of The Children of the Abbey, a sentimental Gothic story which almost rivaled the popularity of Mrs. Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho. So that's how popular Regina was in this time period, right? It's almost tragic that she's gone out of print now, because in the time period, she was a bestseller in her genre. It's like it says here, she was on par with Radcliffe, and Radcliffe is still in print now, so the fact that you can't get a copy of Clermont very easily is quite tragic, and I hope that's something that will change. But in my version of Clermont, there's an introduction that touches on the fact that she essentially just disappeared into obscurity as well. So she was incredibly popular at the time that she was writing The Children of the Abbey and Clermont, and then it seems that she got into financial difficulties after she got married, and yeah, basically just like disappeared, retired in this little village, and died at the age of 81. And in the introduction, it states, "This distinguished writer had retired from the world, and the world had forgotten her. But many young hearts, now old, must remember the effect upon them of her graceful and touching compositions, and imaginations once excited by her skill will yet acknowledge her loss with a melancholy feeling of regret, that the bright should thus have faded in an overwhelming darkness of fast flitting years." And I think there is something really tragic about the fact that there are many authors like Regina who write, books like Clermont, which I thoroughly enjoyed, okay? Was it wacky and wild? Yes, absolutely. As many of the horrid novels are, okay? Gothic novels in the late 18th century, early 19th century, they were just bizarre, okay? They were totally bizarre. But this was really enjoyable. The pace was great. I actually think Regina is an incredible writer. The characters, these aren't Austen's characters, and this isn't Austen's writing, and Austen is the master of the character, right? And I feel like we've been spoilt by Austen's work in how we maybe assess other writers on the basis of how they create and portray their characters. So if you're looking for Austen level characters, this isn't it. But there was so much in this book which I found so comforting, in the sense that I saw so many markers of inspiration that Austen would have found in these books that then she used in her works, through Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, obviously Northanger Abbey, even Mansfield Park. Like, there was so many moments that I was like, I can see her taking this and kind of running with it in her own books as well. A lot of these stories, like, they tackle some pretty challenging topics. They get a bit crazy. I mean, I must admit, the one on the list that we've read that was written by a man was the craziest. So they're a little bit more subdued than The Monk, which was next level mental. But they're still quite, I would say, like, when you think, I mean, I'm not here pretending that the time period everybody was like, so prim and proper. I feel like that is definitely being debunked. And if you listen to my episode that I did with Helena Kelly, you'll see how much that is debunked. And this was a time of a mass amount of change, chaos, and curiosity. So it's not surprising to me that women were, taking up the pen and writing these kind of novels. But I think sometimes some of the things that happen, I'm still quite shocked. I don't know about you, Martha.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's more that it's the shock comes from, like you say, that kind of idea we have around that time period. And I think where the novelist who has survived the most in the kind of public eye is Jane Austen, and she writes quite different books to these ones. Obviously, Northanger Abbey has elements of this, and that's why we're looking at them. But you just kind of realise, actually, there was a lot of subversive things going on. Like you say, though, the one we read, The Monk, which was by Matthew Lewis, that was definitely the most disturbing one we read. I don't think any of these are disturbing. They're odd and they're a bit crazy and wild, but The Monk was disturbing, and you could tell that it had a different author who kind of wrote about things in a very kind of male-minded way. There was a lot of stuff around kind of sexual assault and things, wasn't there? That was just kind of like, oh yeah, this happens, moving on. And I don't think that the female authors tackle those topics in the same way, because I feel like that was much more, you see the female emotions, if anything, around that kind of topic does occur within the novel, which we didn't get in The Monk. But yeah, it's definitely, some of the stuff that happens is quite wild, but it's funny because a lot of it is reminiscent of the bits in Northanger Abbey that kind of Catherine gets sucked into and then is told, this is England, this doesn't happen here. Whereas obviously, like most of the others, this one was set in France or Italy or somewhere, but this one was obviously in France.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're saying that, like, the links to Northanger Abbey. Something that I love about doing this process, and I think I say this every year, is how much better I understand Austen through reading, like, her contemporaries and her predecessors. There was so much in this novel. Like, I wrote so many notes, ones being like, oh my gosh, this reminds me so much of Sense and Sensibility. This one reminds me so much of Pride and Prejudice. And I'm not saying that in the sense, like, sometimes I come to this, like, every time we do this each year, sometimes I come to the book, and I don't know about you, Martha, but I get this kind of slight dread that I'm going to pick something up which is going to make me feel like Jane Austen's, like, plagiarised somebody of her time. So sometimes I have, like, a bit of a panic that I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope this isn't going to have so much similarity that it's totally going to, like, deconstruct my whole ideas of life, which never happens. In every time I read one of these, it makes me actually appreciate what an incredible writer Austen is. Not that these women writers, and obviously Matthew Lewis as well, these writers that we've read aren't incredible as well in their own right, and there's so much to take away from it, but I think what I feel is how much Austen is kind of like standing on the shoulders of these people, because Austen is timeless for a reason, because she almost is like had that step up from these. So like she's been able to read these novels, get these ideas, get her thoughts formulated, and then when she's writing it, it almost is like it's like the magic that maybe every writer hopes for, like Austen's been able to create. And then that's why it's sustained like through time. And like we can still enjoy Austen now in a way that I don't think people aren't picking up these books, unfortunately, anymore. And I think part of that is because they are much more difficult than Austen to read.
I would completely agree with you as well. And I think when it comes to these authors that are kind of less well known nowadays, and actually this was quite a hard book to get hold of. There's a free scanned copy online, which is what I read, which is great. So if you want to read it, there's a PDF out there on the internet because it's out of print. Or I think there was a collection of Northanger Abbey horrid novels that was in, but I thought that would be too difficult for me to scroll through to find that specific book. But I think you realise actually Austen survived so well because her books are so different, and it's not so much different in some of the content may be a little bit similar in terms of some of the same themes are reminiscent, particularly with this one in Northanger Abbey. But I think part of it is her exploration of people and character is just so strong, because I never found that with the four we've read for kind of this spooky season episode, I've never found the characters to be as engaging. I don't root for them in the same way. I don't understand their motivations in the same way. And it's not that I dislike all of them. I mean, some of the characters are horrible. But our female heroines, like, they're fine. But they're nothing, they don't capture me in the same way as Catherine Morland does, or somebody like that. And I think that's the huge difference, is Austen's characters are so great. And even though she was born, 250 years ago now, we're in the anniversary since she was born, the people that she writes you can recognise in today. Like, she just knows people so well, and I think that's the big difference. Obviously her plots are great, I love the romances, I love everything that goes on, but I think it's the characters that she brings to life in such an amazing way that makes her stand out so much.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Her characters, her world building is so much better. The stories, the narrative voice. It's almost astounding to even consider the fact that these books that we're reading were her contemporaries, because of how different they are. It's really quite astonishing to me that Austen was able to write the books that she wrote. I do want to preface as well, I think it's absolutely tragic that like Regina's this particular book Clermont's gone out of print, because I think there's something so tragic about that in general. Even though obviously like we're celebrating Austen and like how amazing it is that she's, you know, stood the test of time. It's like how many other women writers haven't had that opportunity. Do you know what I mean? That they've just like disappeared into the abyss. I think there was like a note in the introduction of the one we read that literally said, this distinguished writer has retired from the world and the world had forgotten her. But many young hearts, now old, must remember the effect upon them. For her graceful and touching compositions, and imaginations once excited by her skill will yet acknowledge her loss with a melancholy feeling of regret. And the bright should thus have faded in the overwhelming darkness of fast-fitting years. And I actually really broke my heart, because I was like, yeah, it's really tragic actually that, you know, these women wrote these books. And at the time, like, Clermont was a bestseller, right? These were popular books. The books that Anne Radcliffe wrote, and obviously she's kind of being able to sustain, like, her literary like works have managed to sustain themselves much longer. But to think that, you know, Regina's books just like you can't get hold of it, the only way you can get hold of it is a scanned in PDF on Google Books. And my goodness, thank God for Google Books for putting it on there. Otherwise this is not a book you'd be able to get hold of easily. I think I saw you could get one online, like a really old copy for like £1,200, or like you said, there was maybe one publishing company who've like done it again. But I think kind of looking, you'd have to wait like 4 weeks to get a physical copy of it. And I would doubt even if you'd be sent it, to be honest with you, if you ordered it.
Yeah, it was definitely hard to track down. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, that's why I really enjoy going to Chawton House Library, right near Chawton House where Jane Austen lived. But the actual library there is great because they celebrate those kind of more less well known, I guess, nowadays, female writers from that era, and they do like different exhibitions and stuff on them, and it's really interesting. And I wonder if the difference between the female authors and Austen's writing of character is partly due to it being a Gothic novel where the emphasis is on the plot and the drama, because I would say the closest I've read in terms of characterization and kind of similar novel wise would be Frances Burney's Evelina. That's the closest I would say in terms of that. Those characters I absolutely loved. I devoured that book. I thought it was wonderful. But I wonder if that's the difference with the genre, because obviously Northanger Abbey kind of sits on that Gothic genre barrier because it doesn't fully go into the Gothic, and it somewhat kind of parodies it and makes a laugh of it, but also does it in a way that's quite respectful, because she's obviously recognising the talent of those authors, but realising that actually that's not how day-to-day life is for most people. And actually for young women, that escapism through reading those dramatic novels was quite a big thing for a lot of them.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point as well. It takes me kind of back to the episode that I did with Kaylee about Jane Bennett, and kind of how the reason characters like Elizabeth Bennet are so popular now is because she leans into like the era of the character. Like actually when like personality and like you as a character stands out more than kind of the archetype that you fall into. Whereas I feel like this novel in particular, and some of the others that we've read more in the Gothic genre, within the, late 18th century, early 19th century books, they focus more on like an archetype. So like, Madeline, who's our protagonist in this one, she is very much like the ingenue, like perfect ingenue. And I feel like some of the others we've read as well, like people very clearly fit into categories, and we always have like the same kind of characters. What I'm finding, Martha, every time we read these is like there's like ingenue, her dad, love interest, there's like some villainous rogue. There's just always the same. There's usually like a motherly figure who isn't her mother. Like
Yeah.
there's always the same characters that pop up every single time. And obviously, I think what's hilarious is that these women writers at the time, they were kind of considered as being like these rivals in the genre, but they were all writing really quite similar things. So I'm not even like surprised. And I suppose now, I guess it's similar to, I think maybe how romantasy or like romance is written now, that I think one of the criticisms that we see a lot online is people saying like, why are we just being force fed like the same book over and over again, especially when it falls into like tropes and things. It's like, this is the same book just like repeated out. But obviously that's not something that's died off. That's something that was happening back then as well, but people loved it, so they just kept consuming these books anyway.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with having those archetypes. I mean, that is one thing that definitely stands out. I would say the female characters are quite different to Austen's characters. They're not as strong, but the male characters, you would not be swooning over any of the male romance leads in any of these novels. I mean, we thought Valancourt was bad in Udolpho, but D. Savine, however you say his name in this one, was way worse, I think. There's no Henry Tilney vibe about him at all. So I thought, lucky Catherine, she gets somebody a lot better and doesn't have to deal with all the real Gothic stuff. But definitely it's almost comic the way that they portray these men. And I don't actually think that their aim is like part of what Austen writes is she's writing a love story that she wants you to love. Like she wants you to get invested in that story and those characters. And I feel like in these novels, their aim is to entertain, which is absolutely fine. But I don't think that they're expecting you to be swooning over the male lead, because there's nothing to swoon about.
No, honestly, there's nothing I love more. I think I said this on like my Instagram story, than like the men in these like 18th century novels. They're just absolutely hilarious. They're so dramatic. They're very clumsy a lot of the time. They are cannot flirt at all. Like the villains tend to be better flirts than the actual male love interests. And for whatever reason, like bushes seem to be portals for them. Like they can travel around Europe via bushes. It's very and that's just like, that's the same across all of these books, and I don't really understand. It's like, Lord of the Rings level world building, and it's also transpires across different authors that bushes are just seen as portals. That's fine.
Yeah, they just pop up everywhere. And I would say that like some of the bits in this novel with the male lead was almost more, I don't know, he kind of gives me like Elton Mr. Elton vibes, or even
Yes.
Mr. Collins vibes. Like there's no Darcy or anything about him, and he's a very strange character where he pops up, and then you think, why is she in love with him? Because he just keeps appearing, and then he keeps being like, no, I can't be with you. And then he like runs off again, and then he disappears for a chunk. He's a very random individual, I think, and I wrote down the word odd about him quite a few times in my notes
The man's
because I was
just
like,
odd.
he's just quite a strange character. And he does kind of disappear for quite a chunk of the book as well. And you assume he's going to come back, but actually he's not been mentioned for a while, and then eventually he does. But
Which again is really common. That we're always introduced to love interest quite early on, and then they disappear for a good section of the book, only to reappear at the end, and things have miraculously worked out that they can actually be together. That's another like common thread that runs through these books, which is interesting. But like you said as well, I wonder if this is Austen reading these and thinking, hang on a second, there's nothing romantic about this. Like there's nothing that's like enticing me, and these men are like really daft. I want to write a different story here, like something where there's actually men that you can really root for, and women characters you can really root for. I think it's hard to root for the heroines in this just because you want them to survive. It's not because you actually want them to thrive in life. You're like, oh, I really want you to have the best in everything, because it's like I don't even think they know what that is. So yeah, it's more just like, oh, I hope you make it to the end of the book because you're the best of a bad bunch.
no, I completely agree, and I think that is the difference. I can just picture like Jane Austen reading this like round the fireplace or whatever in her parents' home and thinking, what an absolute fool, the same as we do, because she would not have suffered these characters and these people. But I think that's what makes it so entertaining as well, is imagining people from the time reading it. And I think, like we said, like a lot of these novels, their aim was to entertain. I think a lot of the time it was about people having something fast paced to read, sink their teeth into, really enjoy it, without having that deep kind of character reflection that we have in Austen's novels. Obviously, Austen's novels are also very enjoyable, but in a different way. And I think that exploration of like character and personality is really important in her books. But in these, you're just here for a wild ride, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's so true. So what we'll do, as usual, is we'll kind of work through. I've split the book into parts, but the book was written in 4 volumes and has multiple chapters within the volumes. It's around 400 pages long, which I don't know if you know, Martha, how that equates based to the other books that we've read. I don't know how it's like reflective.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I audiobooked Udolpho, so I can't remember how long it was. I think volumes wise, it was definitely 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably similar.
Yeah.
But when we got to like volume 2 or 3, I was like, how is there still more to come? Because so much had already happened, but a lot more did happen. There was still a lot of craziness to come.
Yeah, actually, I surprisingly really enjoyed this because of that, because I felt like each volume really did stand on its own as like in terms of how much happened, how much we kind of uncovered and like meeting new characters and things. So I actually quite loved it because each volume was really interesting. I feel like there's been I think I felt this with Udolpho, sometimes there was too long of periods where nothing interesting happened, whereas I didn't find that with this one. I felt like there was always something interesting happening, even if I was like, why is this happening? It was still like engaging because I was like, this is so wild.
Yeah, I mean, volume 1 was definitely the slowest one, I think, out of the 4. But there was a lot of kind of like scene setting and a bit of background. And it had kind of the least Gothic elements, I think. There was still the odd hint to the Gothic, but it didn't, because I was thinking, oh, is this... it was very I think the first volume was very Northanger Abbey reminiscent because it wasn't heavy on the Gothic. And I thought, oh, I wonder how Gothic it's going to get. And then it got really Gothic in the later volumes. So it definitely, if Gothic's something you really enjoy, definitely kind of stick it out through the first volume because it is kind of less Gothic, but it sets up a lot of drama to come.
Yeah, I feel like I messaged you when I was in like volume 1 and I was just like, is there like Gothicness to come? This is not giving Gothic literature.
Yeah, I was like, just wait, Izzy, you'll get there.
Oh, this is because Martha is much more like, she's always reading way before I am. I'm here reading like 48 hours before we come live. I'm just like, yeah, I've got this, it's fine. Martha's like, okay, you enjoy that journey.
To be fair, I only finished it a couple of days before, so I was hoping I'd get through it all in time because... yeah, I was worried because I've been busy, but thankfully I did, and I did enjoy it, reading it in chunks.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a good one. So if we head back to like the start of the book, we're introduced to Clermont and Madeline. Who Madeline is our main protagonist. She's the heroine that we're going to follow through, and Clermont is her father, who she lives with. Now, the start of this book was very much for me giving Beauty and the Beast. They live in this little cottage. There's like this Gothic castle that's kind of just ahead of them that they go and take strolls in the gardens. And they kind of live a bit secluded. So this is like a little description of Madeline in the book. Such was Madeline Clermont, who, ignorant of the world, neither practised its follies, sighed for its pleasures, or dreaded its vices. Her highest wish was gratified when she could steal from the brow of her father its unusual sadness and render him for a moment forgetful of his sorrows. So her dad is continuously kind of this mysterious character who's always sad, which is a reoccurring theme throughout this book of characters. They don't really see anybody until what's his name again? What we're going to call him, like Savion?
I think Savine, but I might be wrong with that.
Savine. I feel like it's Savon. I'm gonna have to let me see if I can find out how to say this. Seven yay, that's how you say it. It's like seven.
Oh god, I've definitely
yay.
said that wrong early on. Okay.
No, that is it. This is the other issue me and Martha have, Kate, because all the names are like they're either like French or Spanish or Italian, and we do really struggle. So we apologise. We know that we probably butcher so many names in all of these episodes, but we are trying our best. We really are. So Sevion is the love interest. So he rocks up really early, a couple pages in. He is just wandering around. I feel like the maid sees him first and she's like, ooh, what an attractive man. There's like this attractive man about. And then Madeline and Clermont, they're kind of intrigued. And then I believe Madeline bumps into him when she's just kind of chilling in the grounds of this castle, right? And she's like, oh. And he's like, oh, hi, I've been like essentially stalking you.
Yeah, doesn't she find a drawing and it's of her? And she's like, why is there a drawing here of me?
Oh my God.
Which gave me Valancourt vibes from Udolpho.
I totally forgot that. That's so funny. Stop. She does. She finds a drawing and she's like, why is this me at the castle? Like, who's me? Because she thinks somebody's watching her. She's like, oh, someone's watching me. I best go home. Anyway, it turns out to be Savion who is stalking her. And then doesn't something happen to him? Like he takes a fall or a tumble or something and he becomes ill?
Yeah, he gets injured.
Yeah, he gets injured, and then Clermont, who apparently is some miraculous healer, goes to Sevion to try and heal him and make him better. It's never explained why he has such a skill set, and trust me, when we get further in the book, you're going to think, why didn't he use his skill set then? So, so he goes and heals him, and it's very much giving sensibility Willoughby, but it's like the roles are reversed. So when Marianne hurts her ankle and Willoughby keeps coming around and they get to know each other, they're reading poetry. It's kind of similar, but the roles are reversed. So Sevion, he's obviously injured, he's healing, and Madeline keeps going to him, and they just kind of sit together and they get to know each other, and they fall in love in a couple of pages. So we love that for them. It's quick, it's fine, it's great. And so they become close, but Clermont's really weird about it. He's just like, I don't like this guy. There's not really much explanation given. He's just like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. And Sevion, in very Willoughby fashion, just rocks up one day and he's like, I've got to go. I'm sorry that I'm breaking your heart. She's crying, she's devastated, and he's like, yep, got to go. This is the Sevion when they're in one of their debates of whether or not they're going to be together or not, which is 50% of the novel. I must be gone at last, cried he. Every moment I stay but increases my reluctance to depart. Oh, Madeline, no words can express my heaviness of heart. I must fly, he said, or I shall no longer have any command over myself. The breeze that blew in the window has wafted aside the hair of Madeline from her forehead. De Sevion pressed his lips against it for a moment, and dropping on his knee, bless heaven, he cried, blessed with the choicest thy gifts, the loveliest of thy works. He's just so dramatic. But I kind of love it at the same time.
It did actually give me big Willoughby vibes, but not from the dashing element, because he's not dashing at all. But because there is a part of me that kind of low-key loves Willoughby early on in Sense and Sensibility. But it had that vibe of chopping and changing. He keeps being like, oh, I really like you. Oh no, I can't be with you. Really dramatic. But yeah, it gave me a really similar vibe, and then he just disappears. And what I thought was so funny, and one of the things I really noticed with these Gothic novels, is the kind of servants and the staff have much more of a presence than they do in Austen's novels. Like, we hear from them a lot more. And is it Jacqueline is their kind of housekeeper? She's so dramatic when he leaves, and I just find it really entertaining that we get to see that. And I think that they kind of, we were saying about it, weren't they, how Madeline throughout the novel kind of like shuts down anything about gossip. Like, she wants to know things, but she won't find out because her dad's got a lot of secrets. Like, oh, like Clermont, he's got a lot of secrets. She doesn't really know a lot about him, but she's like, oh, I couldn't possibly hear from anybody else apart from him. And what I love in Austen is Austen's like, she knows the female characters want to gossip and she lets them. But in these Gothic novels, all the gossip comes from the servants, and like Madeline and the other characters just happen to overhear it, but they're not involved. They wouldn't dare gossip, but they might learn things through it. And I just think it's quite a funny difference between it, because people like Emma Woodhouse, for example, she's all for the gossip, but it's just funny how they kind of separate their like female, like soft female characters in these novels, how they wouldn't dare ask about any information, but the servants absolutely will talk as much as they want.
It's almost like they always have to stop them. Like, Madeline's like, please stop talking about this. Like, I can't know what's going on. Whether the servants are just like blabbering on about stuff. They're like, oh, well, you know, he's a ruffian. I've seen this and that, and this has happened. And, you know, Josie across the road, she told me this story about him. They aren't filtered at all. The servants aren't. I agree. I actually think that's something that I love about these that I probably do miss in Austen, is how hilarious the servants are. This is like, this is a really great quote in relation to how the servants behave and like what we're saying about the fact that the servants love to gossip. It says here, and also I think what's great is we do start to see these like the different like class systems within these books as well, which I think matters because often a lot of the conflict comes because of like power and money. It's often like the nobility like really going at each other in these books, and that's where the problem lies. So I actually love that it's often the servants who actually also play a significant role, because it shows how much there's like a blurred line when it comes to morals. It's like, actually that doesn't matter about where you sit. Actually, you can be good and be in nobility, you can be good and be a servant, or vice versa. So that's something I really enjoy about these ones, is like that kind of the question around morality.
Yeah, and their characters and the conversations they have really help to drive the plot along. And it reminds me of that bit from Bridgerton season 1, with, oh God, is it, what's his name? Nigel Burbrook?
Yes.
Yeah, Nigel Burbrook. And Lady Bridgerton's like, we're going to do what women do and we're going to talk. And you see women of her class talking, and then you see all like the maids and that talking with each other, and the gossip spreads so quickly. So I think it's really reminiscent of that element of, actually, just because these people might be in like a serving position in the house, they know everything that's going on. They know all the gossip, and they are probably way more informed than a lot of the other characters, and they're definitely more informed than Madeline is throughout the whole novel.
Yeah, and often they have like family members who work in other households who are sharing information, or their friends. So they're very much the web that keeps these books together. Okay, we would know nothing. These books would not even be like, there'd be no story if it wasn't for the servants. Okay, they're the ones that make the story. And so yeah, so he disappears, and then appears Countess de Merville, I think. De Merville. Let's go with that. And we're just going to call her Countess, okay? So the Countess shows up, some long lost friend of the Clermonts, which makes no sense whatsoever. We have no idea how they're friends. She just rocks up to this little cottage, and she's initially it's like a little bit shady, because like Madeline sees like Clermont and the Countess like get up in the middle of the night, and they like have this secret conversation, and I was like, ooh, scandalous. They just like they're just gonna have like a moment, but actually they're just devising a plan that Madeline is gonna go with the Countess. She's just going to take her under her wing, and like she's going to like introduce her to society and kind of give her better prospects than what she has at this little cottage with her father. So yeah, that leads us into what I'm classifying as is part 2, when the Countess and Madeline travel together. Do you want to take it up from there, Martha?
Yeah. So I thought that was the first of our convenient meetings, as I like to call them. Quite a few happen. but yeah, so she goes off with the Countess, and the Countess talks about taking her to her house where she lives, with the aim kind of down the line to take Madeline to Paris and introduce her to society. We never actually get as far as Paris, but we hear about it quite a lot.
Well, we
And
don't with
this
the
is the
Countess
bit.
anyway.
No. Well, this is the bit that actually I felt was kind of like there was kind of Gothic elements, but not full Gothic yet. So she goes off to the Countess's chateau, and what I found really interesting was her kind of initial reflections there very much reminded me of Catherine Morland when she stays at Northanger Abbey, and she's like a bit sus around the room, and she's kind of got some questions, and she's not 100%, but nothing dramatic happens that night, and actually she makes friends in the village, and she goes to stay with them, and how are we saying his name? De Savignon?
Sevignon. So seven
Savignon.
yon.
Savignon, he pops up again, and on my notes I wrote he seems like a fool, because he pops up again, and they go to a party and stuff, and he's very much doing the Willoughby thing we talked about of, oh, I really like you, but oh, I can't talk to you, and there's just a lot of kind of strange scenes happens at this point. The Countess then gets really unwell, so the friends that Madeline's been staying with that she's met through her return her back, and they disappear off to Verona for quite a big chunk of the novel then. And she's staying with the Countess and kind of looking after her. And then there's a really strange scene where the Countess gets stabbed outside of the family chapel, and they make it really clear that it's a family member, but that they can't say anything else. But none of her family are there. So we're thinking, who is this person that stabbed her? And she survives initially, doesn't she? She lives for like maybe a couple days, and then eventually dies.
In the process of surviving these couple of days, the only thing she's concerned about is nobody investigating who stabbed her. It's like, this must be
and you
a
think
secret.
it would be the opposite. So, like, one of her servants knows, doesn't she? So Agatha, one of the servants that we meet at the chateau, she finds the Countess, and Madeline sees this like hooded figure like run off. She's like, oh my god, she's just been stabbed. But they're like, you absolutely can't say anything like to anybody, you can't know what's happened, we'll say she fell on something.
What's hilarious as well is Madeline's like, oh my goodness, like, she's been stabbed, this is terrible, like, this is my friend, I better go and get help. And then she stops herself before she leaves, and she goes, wait, what was if the murderers are outside? I can't go out there. And she like has they have this whole like debate with each other about what they're gonna do, and the Countess is just like, no, it's fine, like, let's not make a big deal out of this. And the Countess's friend, who we're just gonna refer to as the priest, what was it again? It's not Bertram.
I think it's Bertrand.
It's Bertrand, which I think sounds really similar to Bertram.
Yeah.
And this is the Countess's like priest friend, who rocks up. I don't know if you want to say a bit about this guy.
Yeah, so he's like friends with the Countess. He's been part of like the area for a long time, and he's like her confessor, isn't he? Because obviously they're always Catholic in these kinds of novels. But we hear like his whole backstory, which I didn't think was super relevant, about how he was due to marry somebody, and then they didn't approve of him marrying her, and then they got married anyway, and then she died, and
She
it's
like
this
falls
whole
off
drama.
a boat or something. It's
Yeah,
really
she
rogue.
like dies at sea, like falls off a boat, I think, in like some sort of storm. And then he comes to the chateau where the Countess is, and then kind of becomes her confessor. But he's really sus around it, because I think he also knows who this family member is who stabbed her, but he won't say anything either.
He
So
like
the whole
quickly
thing-
gets her buried and everything. Like by sus, I mean like
Yeah.
he is like, oh, quickly get somebody in and just like, you know, make sure everything's like, I don't know, I was gonna say sage the place, but you know, the Catholic equivalent. He was like, let's sort this. And like her daughter rocks up, and he's like, no, you can't see your mum. Like she's already been like buried. She's like she's buried. She's in her coffin. The coffin's sealed. Like there's no one's going to her at this point. He's like really weird. So I started to be like, okay, there's something seriously up with this guy.
But then he never pops up again.
Never appears again.
So he was really dramatic for like no reason. And that actually, I think, takes us. I mean, I know you said you've broken it down into parts in your head, but I think that's the end of volume 2. Is the Countess's death, and then her daughter arrives, who is quite dramatic. She gives me oh my god, why can't I think of her name?
Like Mary?
Anne's sister.
Mary?
Yes.
Sister Mary?
Sister Mary. She gives me Sister Mary vibes. And obviously she's really upset that her mother's passed away, but her reaction to Madeline is very strange. She basically bonds with her immediately, and she's like, "Oh, my love, you're now my closest friend. We've just met. And my husband's going to appear, but you can't be seen by him, so we must lock you away in the chamber where my mum died." And it gets really gothic really quickly.
Oh my god! I just want to add as well how hilarious this is probably like one of my favorite sections of the book. This whole bit. So just before this happens as well, the Sauvignon, he's like about again this lover. He like pops back up. And he like goes and visits her like at the grotto, and he's like saying like, "I do love you, like I want to be with you." And Madeline's like, "I'm honestly so sick of this like hot and cold that you've got going on. Like one minute you love me, one minute you don't. You want to be with me, you don't want to be with me. Like I don't understand what's happening." And he gets like so dramatic in this scene. I'm so sorry, I just have to bring this up because it's so freaking funny. This whole scene that he does this, he gets so distressed that he like flings himself at the side of the grotto and knocks himself out. So then she thinks that she thinks he's died. So she's like, "Oh my goodness, like this is it, like he's died." And he comes back around and she's like, "Oh my goodness, like thank goodness." And then they still decide to just part ways. It's like, okay, that was fine. We just had a really dramatic moment, but like we're still not going to work out. I'm so sorry. That comes before the Countess's daughter rocks up and entraps Madeline in the crypt with her dead mother.
Yeah, it gets really strange because she says to her, doesn't she, like, "Oh, you need to stay in her chamber." And then they end up actually making her go to the chapel, like you say, to the crypt. And Agnes, not Agnes, I put Agnes, it's Agatha, isn't it? Why have I written Agnes in my notes? Please.
No, Agnes was in the last one, wasn't she? I swear we had an Agnes in the last one.
We did. It's Agatha. I don't know why I wrote Agnes. And then it gets really dramatic because I can't remember if it's before. I think it's once the daughter arrives, Agatha, who was the maid, the servant or the maid to the Countess who was there when the Countess got stabbed, is then poisoned. And they talk about how she died really quickly, and then Floretta, one of the other maids, is like, and then her body went black, and everyone's like, "Oh." And then they just move on from the fact that this servant's been poisoned in the house. And it was just, yeah, this whole volume gets really gothic, I think. And there's a lot of questionable things going on.
And also, Madeline is just like, she's like, Agatha's being killed as well. Like, she's like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I don't understand. But then she's equally, like, not disturbed enough, I don't think, with the fact that people are just, like, dying all of a sudden, like, in this one household. It's like, if they know this information, they're, like, dying. But I think she equally is a little bit like, oh my goodness, like, there's obviously, like, a murderer on the loose, and they might come for me next.
Because she really wants to leave, doesn't she? Once the Countess died, she really wants to go back to her father. She doesn't think she should be there. She's really uncomfortable. She's quite nervous because multiple people have died. But the Countess's daughter, Madame de Lambert, is how I'm going to say it, is adamant that she can't leave her because she can't be left on her own and her friend's not allowed to leave her even though they've just met. And she obviously wants Madeline to be locked away in this chamber. And Madeline just goes along with it, which I thought was really weird because I would be like, "No, you're not locking me in this room and I don't want to be here." But she's like, "Oh, I must do it because I owe so much to the Countess who's dead. So I must protect her daughter by staying here." And then they lock her in like the crypt, don't they? And people come looking for her at night. And she thinks it might be the murderer from before. And that person then vanishes. And then the Countess's daughter and one of the servants, like Lubin, they then find her again. And they're like, "Oh, we must like get you away from here."
Yeah.
And the next part of the adventure happens.
No, in part of the are we saying de Lambert? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so de Lambert, like the Countess's daughter, Madame La Lambert, she is super, super weird. The thing that like bugs her the most is not that her mother's died, is the concept of her husband's bumping into Madeline. Like her husband's like said to be this guy's like partying all the time, like he's a bit of a ruffian. And she's like very much like that's her biggest fear. She's like they can't be seen, they can't see each other, they can't meet. So yeah, they like conjure up this plan that they're gonna get Madeline out of this like property and back to her father because that's what she wants. She's like, just take me back to my father. This has been quite traumatic. I don't want to be here anymore. And then so we move into, like, she's back on the road again, back on the road.
Yeah.
And she ends up at another place, this other, like, castle-y place, Gothic place, where the Marquis lives. And she's like staying there, like servants take her in. This bit's all a bit strange. Again, a very convenient situation that she just ends up here on the road, because apparently there's just like one road in France where everybody lives. She stops here and she sees this portrait. Now, this whole scene gives very much, you know, the housekeeper scene in Pride and Prejudice where it's like Mr. Darcy's portrait and she's like, oh, isn't he handsome? This scene is like that, so similar. And she sees this picture and she's like, oh my goodness, it's like the 7 Year. What is he like? Why is his portrait here? And the housekeeper's like, oh, isn't he like, he's so handsome, blah blah blah. And obviously Madeline's like, this is crazy, like, oh my goodness, like as if his portrait's in this place. And then she starts to panic because she's like, oh, I've lost my painting of my father. Like, what am I going to do? She wants to go and find it. Anyway, it turns out that the person who's found it is the Marquis, who she then meets. And he's like, you know, how do you have this painting? Who is this? The person in the picture, how do you know them? And she's like, oh, this is really strange. Like, that's my dad. But okay, like, you're really freaking out about this. And he just like doesn't give answers, does he? He's like, oh, well, if you're gonna have answers, like, it's your dad who's gonna need to tell you. And she's like, what? Like, how has this happened? I've just like come upon this place and now all these things, like, I've had 2 weird instances with paintings.
Yeah, and I found this bit, it was another like convenient meeting because, like you say, how they ended up there was really strange, because he said, oh, let me go see if there's some shelter, and they thought it was like those banditti which keep popping up in Udolpho, don't they, like those kind of crime gangs. And it turns out the servants have like chased them off and everything's fine. And like you say, there's so many like convenient meetings, and I think that she sees, like you say, the picture she sees of the person who looks like de Sévigné is in the room. She gets like put in, doesn't she, in like the Marquis's dead son's bedroom, which, why do they keep making people sleep in dead people's rooms? I think it's really strange. But yeah, he's literally like, oh, I can't tell you anything, you must go to your father, but tell him I want to see him. And then her journey then continues, doesn't it? And she ends up back at the cottage with her dad.
Yes.
And you think, oh, it's calming down, but it doesn't. It then gets even wilder again.
I know, you think, oh my goodness, like, what else is going to happen? Because she's going back to her dad's house. You think we're going back to the beginning, like, things have all been resolved and she's like this changed person. Also, a rumour or like a story that's kind of been floating around is this story of this, who was it then? It was I don't know how it's floated, but there is this floated story about this father whose son dies, like, falling off a cliff, isn't there? That's, like, already come up slightly, but we don't know who these people are. It's just like, yeah, there's this character and, like, his son died, who's devastated, and the Countess is somehow kind of wrapped up in that, and that's, like, one of the reasons why she's always depressed, I think, was, like, the thing in, like, when I first read it, I thought it was because it was, like, something to do with, like, her daughter's family, which it kind of is, but isn't. So, yeah, that's been floating as well, which I think is good to bring up now as we move back into us going back to her father's house, because then things start to be revealed to us. Would you like to pick it up, Martha?
Yes, so from the beginning, her dad was quite suspicious character. He seemed loving and he seemed to really care about her, and there was nothing really Gothic about his attitude towards her, but she basically knew nothing about him or how he ended up there or how he knew the Countess, and she's never found anything out until this point. So she returns to her father and she says, I've met this Marquis. He's adamant that you need to come and see him. He wants to see you. And they say, right, let's pack up, let's go. We'll gift the cottage to Jacqueline, the kind of servant who lives there, who's also super dramatic in this bit. And I think it's in the coach on the way there that he starts to like reveal his story to her. And it turns out that he's the son of the Marquis, who they're now going back to. So he's actually a nobleman's son. And you think, like, okay, so how did he end up in this situation? but there's a lot of kind of history that's explained about her mother and how he knew the Countess, and it turns out he was like the ward, wasn't he, of the Countess's father growing up. They were always really good friends, and there's this whole kind of drama story around how his mother, so Clermont's mother, was married to the Marquis, and he then denied that marriage and tried to say they'd never been married and that he'd been born out of wedlock, even though he was the legal heir. And when he grew up and he finally met the Marquis, the Marquis basically rejected him, and he now wants to kind of welcome him back as the Marquis's son, Philippe, who is the person that Madeline saw the picture of. Sorry, this is very confusing. Is like his half-brother. But when they get to the chateau, there's loads of suggestions that her dad might be the murderer of his half-brother. And it's hinted at quite heavily.
By the servants again.
Yeah, again, by the servants. And then that's the end of volume 3. And then you get into volume 4, which it was definitely the wildest volume we had.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So going back, we get back to there, and then we move into volume 3 is kind of wild. I'm not gonna lie to you. So when we get back, when the Marquis is there and we're like all reunited, and it's like, hello son, it's a very touching, like they're reunited as if like no time has passed, and it's very emotional. It's very nice. Madeline doesn't seem to start like ruminating on the fact that obviously she doesn't ask anyone why this guy in the painting looks just like the Sauvignon. Like she doesn't ask her dad, who's also met him, like, oh, who's the guy in the portrait? Why does he look like my ex-lover? That doesn't seem to.
Who her dad has met.
Exactly,
so,
that's
like,
the point. Her dad's met him.
How did he never notice that they looked similar beforehand? And then we start to get some of the other characters coming in, don't we? So Madame de Lambert's father-in-law then appears, and he is really creepy.
Can we call him de Lambert Senior? Because we have a de Lambert Junior, which is married to the Countess's daughter. If we remember, he's the ruffian who was having the parties.
He is really strange, and I wrote down, why does de Lambert Senior sneak into her room? Creep was one of my sentences.
Yes, he's so creepy.
Because he really, really wants Madeline to marry his son, and he says the countess's daughter, Madame de Lambert, she's died, she's dead, and he's now single and he wants to marry you. And
which she's
Madeline's
stressed
like,
about. She's like, that's my friend.
Yeah, she's like, so firstly my friend's dead, and also why does this man want to marry me if his wife's just died? Like, that's a big red flag. She's really uncertain. And at this point, actually, we see the most strength in her character, I think. She's very much like, I'm not going to marry him. You can try and do what you want. I'm not interested. And then basically he blackmails her, doesn't he, by saying, I know that your father murdered his brother, and you need to ask him to tell you the story, because if you don't do what I'm telling you, I'm going to tell the whole world, and your dad will go to jail or be killed.
Yeah, and she's like, what the hell? Like, what's going... And also, like, why have you still not explained how my friends just, like, miraculously died, too? I'm so confused. Like, she's now died. I've never met this, your son.
Who apparently wants to marry her.
Desperately wants to marry. And she's, like, so confused. She's like, why is this man so obsessed with me when he's never met me? And, like, why is his father so pushy about it? Because he literally does keep, like, appearing in her room. He keeps, like, propositioning her at random points. He's tried to, like, totally get her father on his side. And, like, her father's, like, pretty much like, oh, yeah, this sounds great. And then she's like, Dad, this is so strange. Like, what is happening? And then her dad's like, oh, yeah, it is a bit strange. Maybe not. And the Marquis
and he lets her make her choice, doesn't he? He respects her decision, and you find out that all of this is happening because before her father turned back up and reunites with the Marquis, de Lambert Senior and his son were the heirs to the Marquis's estate and fortune. So they're now unhappy that they've lost that. So they're convinced that if de Lambert Junior marries Madeline, they've regained their claim to this family seat. So it's all that kind of family politics and inheritance, I think, that is the kind of the driving force.
The driving force of this whole story, which we're only just starting to discover this is the driving force, because we didn't realise this all comes about because Clermont starts to tell his story. Which then, when this happens and she's like, when, oh God, what's his name? Senior. Should we just call him Senior? what's his
Yeah,
second name?
D'Lambert.
D'Lambert, that's it. D'Lambert Senior, obviously, by him saying, like, you need to go and ask your father about the fact that he killed his brother, Madeline's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, my father will tell me if he wants to. In the end, it has, like, her father has to tell her the story because there's so much drama around it and there's so much, like, speculation and talk. And obviously, she's trying to be, like, forced to marry some guy. So then we get Clermont's backstory with the context. So he actually tells the story again. And Madeline was suspicious. She was like, why is there so much she's like, why is there still so much secrecy? Like, he's told me the story, but the story's not really giving story. So she was like, where's the actual context of the story? I'm confused. And so she was right. There was loads of stuff that was left out. I don't know if you want to tell the story of like what actually happened.
It is quite a wild story. So he basically kind of backtracks and, like you say, tells his story again with more information this time. And he says that once his father, the Marquis, had kind of rejected him, he left and his brother Philippe, half brother, kind of caught up to him and they actually kind of became friends. And Philippe took him to this cottage where kind of a disgraced lord from Ireland was living with his two daughters. And one of them is Geraldine, who he marries, and that is Madeline's mother, who dies but when Madeline's born. But what happens in this is he's told that Philippe is dying, so he goes to see Philippe, and then he's staying at some sort of house or like kind of coaching in, and overhears a story from two servants speaking that say, oh, the reason Philippe comes this way, he's not actually dying. He's pretending he's running off with his wife. He's actually going to marry Geraldine, and the whole time Clermont was just there as a ploy to get them closer so he could spend time with her. So Clermont then believes that his wife, or who he thinks is his wife, has actually been having an affair with his brother, and that the child that he's about to have with her isn't his child. And obviously he loses his temper, he bursts in on these servants, and he's like, what on earth's going on? And they're like, oh my lord, you weren't meant to overhear us, blah blah blah. We hear it from this other servant whose I think name was Blanche. She knows all the facts. And he then bumps into his brother, and rather than being like to him like, hey, I've heard this story, like, what's the deal, he just stabs him. So he's then convinced that he's murdered his own brother, and he then finds out, doesn't he, from like a monk or a priest, kind of in the same situation, like in the same kind of day, that actually he was misled, and the person that Philippe had been married to was his wife's sister. So Eleanor, yeah. So there's no kind of overlap, there's no affair, and he was misled to kind of cause him to stab his brother. So he now thinks he's murdered his brother for no reason. But I did write down, why would you not check this before murdering somebody?
Why would you not check your sources, Clermont? Why are we just stabbing people?
Why would you not speak to your own brother who you're friendly with? I just thought it got really strange. And then, so Philippe dies. Philippe stabbed and dies. Eleanor, his wife, who's like kind of Madeline's aunt, I guess, she dies in childbirth, and the baby is, they don't really say, do they? It's kind of taken away, or it might be dead. They're kind of really sus around the baby, the son that she's had.
Yeah, it's like the baby's put into care, but we don't really know what that means.
And then around a similar time, Geraldine has Madeline, and then she dies, and then her dad dies.
Yeah, Geraldine dies of grief because her sisters died, and then their father dies out of grief that both of his daughters have died. So there's a lot of death in Clermont's, like, blimey, I've caused so much havoc, which he has in this particular moment in time. And yeah, again, another priest who's just got all the answers, who's just like rocking about and keeps adding. He's like, he knows that Clermont's stabbed his brother as well, doesn't he? So he's like trying to work with Clermont to keep to a whole secret. But what they keep finding is there's loads of servants who know. There's already loads of servants who know. So this priest is like going around trying to, you know, put plasters on everything because they all know the truth, and then he's just like, oh no, that isn't the truth, this is exactly what happened. So the priest comes up with like this story that's like becomes the known story, that he just like miraculously died falling off a cliff. So that links back to this story that we heard earlier on about this father who loses his son in this tragic circumstance, like falling off a cliff or what have you. And we don't really know how that interlinks, but it links here. It's actually their story.
Yeah. And also one of the people that's involved at this point is Lefroy, who's one of the servants of the Marquis. He's been he was kind of informed around the death of Philippe by Clermont, and he says, like, let me help you guys escape from this situation, because obviously they're being blackmailed by D'Alembert Senior for Madeline to marry his son. So he like helps her dad escape first, and then he's told, he tells Madeline, like, I can take you somewhere safe, I've got a cousin, she'll look after you. So she like goes off with this servant to this house, and then things got even weirder again.
Well, just before then as well, that Madeline gets the letter that confirms the fact that his wife, so D'Alembert Jr.'s wife, who's the Countess's daughter, in fact is not dead.
Is not dead.
Is not actually dead. I think she gets a message to her, doesn't she? She's like, I'm not dead. Like, my husband's crazy. And she's like, obviously Madeline's like totally disturbed. She's like, how is he trying to take me as like this second wife? I think she even confronts Dumont Senior about it, right? She's like, what is going on? Like, his wife's not dead. How can he take an extra wife? And this guy's just like, oh, technicalities. Like, we'll sort that.
Yeah. So she thinks that they're going to escape now. And actually, to be fair, I also thought they were going to escape. I thought, oh, maybe this is how it wraps up. Somebody's going to save her. And then she ends up at this house with this very strange lady and her nephew, Dupont, which is a fake name for D'Alembert Jr., who is trying to seduce Madeline. And it turns out that Lefroy was against them the whole time, and he wasn't trying to help them. And he's known this story to hold over Madeline's dad for like 16, 17 years.
Eyewitness account. Like, Lefroy was on the cliffside when this all went down.
Watched his brother stab him, but Philippe hadn't actually died at this point and was then like taken away by these servants, and her dad hadn't escaped at all at this point. He's in the same house as Madeline, and then it turns out that somebody helps them get out, and it's the person who told the fake story earlier on so that Clermont would stab his brother. The servant Blanche, who was like convinced to share this story,
is also being kept in the basement. Is like some sort of like creepy old lady in the basement. Like, why?
It gave me like Bertha vibes from Jane Eyre, like Woman in the Attic, but like random servant in the house. And then you think that they're gonna like capture her and her father, and they're never going to escape from D'Alembert Jr. And then it turns out to be just Sauvignon. And
Sauvignon and every other hero of the novel just appears in one room in this house because they're all on just this one road in France. So there's only like 5 houses all on this one road. It's giving Monopoly board, okay? It's the Sauvignon and all other heroes appear, plus the Sauvion's father, who is, spoiler, Philip, who never died, the brother.
Yeah.
That's why they look similar in the portraits. They all appear in this one room. And it's like Madeline, Clermont, in Blanche. They're all like behind this like curtain, aren't they? And they like pull the curtain back, and you think all the villains are going to be there, and this is like the end of them, and they're going to die. And it's just all the heroes of the book have appeared instead.
Yeah, and it was so random because they're like, Philippe, where have you been? And he's like, oh, in a cave. So he's just been like locked away by these servants in a cave for the last like 17 years. And he's so chilled out about it because Lefroy the whole time was working for the D'Alemberts, and basically they wanted Philippe and Clermont out the way so they could inherit from the Marquis because they're like kind of next in line. So he's just been in this cave the whole time, and the brothers kind of reconnect, and then we were almost over, and it just happened so quickly. It kind of like, yeah, I've literally put the murdered brother of her dad is not murdered and was like sneaked away by Lefroy, and then suddenly they're making up. The brothers are like back together, like bonded and stuff, and then they're talking about their kids getting married, who are related on both sides because their mums are sisters and their dads are half brothers, so that's way too related for my comfort, thank you very much. And then the novel just ended, and I was like, what has just happened?
It was so weird. Like when they pull the curtain back and it's like the heroes, not the villains. This last chapter is so wild. I found it so jarring. Like I was saying at the start, I actually thought that I'd started reading like a conclusion that somebody else had written, and for some reason I was missing like the last chapter or the last two chapters or something. Then I realised no, the last chapter is genuinely just a summary of any other loose ends. She's literally just like, let me explain all. This is how it all fits together. It's almost like she was like, oh, I don't know how to pull things together, so I'm just going to write a summary chapter, which, if George R.R. Martin's listening to this, I feel like maybe that's your key too. Like, maybe that's what you should do. But yeah, I was like, this is so rogue. The fact that he lives in a cave for 17 years makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I was saying to Martha, what would have made more sense is if it hadn't been Clermont that killed him, like he'd survived that, but then Lefroy, this villainous servant, had maybe like killed him later. I feel like that would have made more sense, but like Clermont had always assumed that it was him who killed him. I feel like that would have made more sense. The fact that he like is resurrected and like comes out of this cave like Jesus or something is totally rogue. Like it makes no sense. And the fact that he's just like suddenly very connected to his son, the Sevillon, when I'm like, how are you guys? You guys don't know each other. Like the only thing you have in common is like you look similar.
That bit was really strange because I was saying to you earlier, wasn't I? Well, before we started actually recording, like, Philippe's like, oh, brother, I forgive you as long as our children can wed. And I'm like, your children are related on both sides. And, like, I get that, okay, obviously, I guess what his brother did to him was very minor compared to then being taken away by servants and kept in a cave for 17 years. But don't you think you need to have a little bit more of a conversation about this situation that went down? I just found the ending really jarring, and it felt like Madeline was barely in it, even though the story had been focused on her. And then suddenly, like, she's happy because she's marrying de Savignon, but you're related on both sides.
Yeah, there's
and I just couldn't get that out of my head.
There's no conversation about that.
No, there's no recognition of the fact that, like, I get, like, in Mansfield Park, we have cousins marrying, which is slightly too close for comfort for me personally. Like, I wouldn't want to marry any of my cousins, but it does happen and it is completely legal. But they're only cousins on one side. These are cousins on both sides, and that really freaked me out. Like, their dads are only half brothers, but they've still got half the DNA, and then their mums are full sisters. So that for me was just like that kind of at the end. I was like, that's too far.
It was too far. It was like, no, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I feel like there was better ways to try and. I don't know how, because I always knew obviously he was going to be like his son or like close relation or something because we saw the portrait and they looked really similar. So I was like, I don't know how we're getting back out of this now, but.
Yeah, it could have been, the whole time Madeline was adopted and she didn't know. Do you know what I mean? There could have been something that could have happened.
Yeah, which is not uncommon. We've seen that storyline play out before, right? It's like, this isn't the daughter of this person. I thought there was a potential that Madeline could have turned out to be the Countess's daughter, which then would have separated them, like, bloodline-wise. So I was a little bit like, there was ways out of this, which weren't just, let's just tie up loose ends.
Pretend it didn't happen and then they just get married.
Yes, and I think what's interesting about this book as well is the Gothic elements. I think this was similar to Udolpho as well. They were kind of like things that were just added in. They didn't necessarily add to the storyline. Like, I feel like in The Monk, the Gothic elements were the storyline, whereas I feel like with this, with Udolpho, they're like things that happen. So like there's this moment where they're sat at the dinner table and they're like talking, and Madeline sees this hand come out from like behind, I think it's like either curtains or something. She sees like this hand reach out, and that was like one of them. And then there's like a few other things that like happen throughout, like just like Gothic things, either like skeletons or what have you, or there's like this pool of blood that they find. And in this final chapter, she like literally goes through anything Gothic that happened and gives an explanation as to why.
All of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that any kind of Gothic element before that you thought could be supernatural, they're all like, oh, that was de Lambert Jr. He happened to be in your room, in your wardrobe, and he was doing that. So it all gets explained. So basically there's no kind of supernatural elements that actually happen in the book because everything has an explanation. But like you say, it was just kind of like, it's like she reread her novel, wrote a list of all the Gothic things and was like, right, I need to answer all of these.
I need to answer all these questions.
And I'm just going to run through and explain how all of these happened.
But the actual way that like, the narrative voice at this point changes so much as well. I think this is why it feels like Madeline's not in it, because it's almost like we suddenly get to a point where it's either like Madeline's explaining to us or someone's explaining to Madeline, but it's very much like it feels like a dialogue in compared to the rest of the book, which feels like we're observing everything that's happening. This feels like some sort of like one way, like a conversation that we're having, and someone's explaining something to us.
Yeah, the voice definitely shifted at the end, like you say, the narrative voice. And there was one other bit that was kind of similar in the novel, which we haven't touched on because it got really confusing. But basically, when Clermont is reunited with his dad, the Marquis, the author's like, by the way, he's now going to be called a different name. And that narrative voice is kind of what came back at the end. And it felt very much like the publisher said, you've got X amount of pages, and she thought, oh god, I'm running out of pages, how do I wrap this all up? So very opposite to how Dickens writes, because obviously his was serialized, wasn't it? So he just goes on and on and on forever. But I was like, there was a lot happening in this final chapter, and like you say, it is very much, she kind of, the author, like, or the narrator kind of like comes back in and she's like, okay, I'm going to wrap this up for you now, and then does so.
It's very postmodern in that sense, actually. And I feel like that is something that Austen herself picks up on in Northanger Abbey too. I think sometimes it's like we feel Austen, there's that section, you know, the defense of the novel. I feel like that feels quite like Austen's putting herself within the book to do that explanation. So I don't think it's necessarily uncommon, but yet this came in some weird, it was jarring the way that this did. It didn't run seamlessly through. So like you said, we end that chapter where we hear the Clermont story, and then the author essentially like puts herself into the book, and she's like, henceforth shall be known as Saint Jean or something. I can't remember what.
Yeah, it's like Saint Julian, I think.
Saint Julian or something. And it's like, why? Like, we're quite happy referring to him as Clermont. Yes, it's a fake name, but like, we don't need to change it at this point because he's been living by such name for 17 years. You know what I mean? Like, if his brother can stand a cave for 17 years, this guy can keep his name, like his fake name. That's okay. And there was a lot of just like crossover with names in general, because I think that just got so confusing. What was really interesting is like, I think just because this book's out of print, in obviously I don't think that many people are reading it nowadays, the actual information you can find on it online is very sparse as well. So even like it literally just refers to, like, if you wanted a character list, like I've had to make one because it only would list like 4 characters. And it, like DeLambert, for instance, it would say DeLambert, son and father. I was thinking like that when I first, because I looked at the character list first, and I was like, oh, they mustn't be very like big characters, and like there's only like 5 characters in this book. But actually, I think DeLambert Senior and Junior play quite a significant role. And this just shows like how much little information is about this book. There's no good summaries of it. So this is very much one that's like, if you've not read it, like you genuinely wouldn't know, and you also wouldn't know the influence I think that it's had on Jane Austen's other books, not just Northanger Abbey, like Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice. Like, I feel like there was a lot in this one that I was like, I can see actual moments that she's been able to pull. Like that one, the portrait scene, I was literally just like, wow, this is very reminiscent. Or the when the start of the book, when Sevillon's being healed back to health and they fall in love over like poetry and stuff, I'm like, it's giving Willoughby Marianne in this cottage.
No, I agree. It definitely had kind of more bits reminiscent of some of her other novels, like you say, and there was a lot that was kind of reminiscent of Northanger as well, which is obviously partly why these books are mentioned in Northanger. But yeah, it was really interesting. I found it to be absolutely, I think the phrase I used to you, Izzy, was wackadoo. I think it's the best description I could come up with for this novel, because I just didn't know how else to summarise it. And yeah, it was definitely a wild ride.
It was. Something that I actually loved about this one as well, though, is I actually think it was a very good, not very good, I feel that's the wrong term. I feel like it could have been a really effective romance novel, or Regina, that's not her name. Regina. Totally just blank then. Regina, I feel like Regina could have made a really good romance writer had she lent into that more than the Gothic. Even though the Gothic elements were interesting, there were some passages that she would write which I thought were really beautiful. Like I highlighted some of them because I was like, oh my goodness, this is really beautiful writing that I feel like can't be appreciated enough in the story that it falls within. So let me see if I've got... Some of her writing is absolutely stunning, and I don't think that the actual book itself necessarily does justice to how good some of her writing actually is. Like, there's just like some moments, right? Okay, so for instance, de Sévillon offered his hand to Madeleine. She took it, she felt it tremble. A rising moon began to dissipate the darkness as they descended the hill. But she could not by this measure save her heart from one pang. For though her eyes were averted from the melancholy of his countenance, her ear was still open to the soft melancholy of his voice, and scarcely could she conceal the emotions it gave her. Every hope relative to him now became extinct, hopes which, notwithstanding the alteration of his manner, had lingered in her heart till this moment, hopes which had cheered her in the long period that separated them, by making her look forward to a second meeting, in which he should disclose sentiments he had only before revealed by his eyes. Like, this is good writing, like, it's enjoyable writing. I think she'd make a really good romance writer. I feel like this is a good one to kind of highlight some of the discussions around, like, nature. This is a really nice little bit here where it says, "Those woods, those wilds, those melancholy glooms, according to my soul's sadness, and draw forth the voice of sorrows from my bursting heart." But yeah, some of that I was like, wow, this is actually really beautiful writing. And I feel like because of the genre that it falls in, it doesn't necessarily do justice what a good writer Regina actually is.
Yeah, I think also the context in which it falls in, because they're probably really similar because they're so related, is where my head went when you talked about souls and being kindred spirits. But one of the things I did really enjoy, and I felt like it was much more in the first volume than in the later bits as the Gothic kind of took over, was I really enjoyed the way she wrote about nature and being outside. And I think she did have some really lovely passages of nature writing in especially the first volume when Madeleine goes up at kind of dusk to the Gothic castle nearby and all those kinds of things. And I think she talked about the seasons really beautifully, but I do think it got wrapped up in a lot of the crazy that then happened in the later bits. But like you say, I think she's a great writer in terms of a lot of the things she included. I mean, the plot was absolutely wild, but some of her actual narrative and kind of particularly around like the natural world, I did really enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think, because I was like trying to pinpoint exactly what it is that I enjoyed with this, I think pace was really good in this book. Like, things are wild, but at least there was always something happening. I think something that I struggle with personally with like Anne Radcliffe's work is very descriptive at times. We can go like a good like chapter just full of like description of like hills, rolling hills, in the love interest just pops out of a bush kind of thing. Whereas this felt very like fast paced. There was always something new happening. I think kind of similar, this is why I probably enjoyed The Castle of Wolvenbach as well, because I think that was quite similar. It was fast paced, there was always something interesting. We were constantly moving, there was a lot of movement, quite similar to Pride and Prejudice, where you're constantly moving to like new locations. Obviously in this it made little to no sense sometimes, but we'll roll with it. We'll roll with this whole idea that, you know, late 18th century, early 19th century, you know, France was just a monopoly board, and so was Italy and Spain, so that's okay. I did really enjoy it. I thought it was good. I would say my thing would be I want people to read it because it's not in print, and I'd love for this to be back in print. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a good enough. If I read it and I was like, I understand why this isn't in print. This is actually terrible. But I actually think it's good enough to be in print. Like, I think people would enjoy it. And I think people who read Austen, who like us, you know, want to get to know her books better, this is how you do it, in my opinion. Like, you read her contemporaries, you read her predecessors. Like, this is where you find, you know, that spark that probably obviously like lit up in Austen, is you find it when you read this. You know what I mean? You see the foundations.
Yeah. And you see those comparisons as well. And they definitely had on the Kindle store, I was looking to try and find an ebook copy. They definitely had what it was featured in like a Northanger novels collection. I just thought I'd get annoyed on my Kindle skipping through to the certain book. But if you haven't read some of them and you want to read, like, work your way through them, particularly with spooky season, that was definitely on the Kindle store, and I thought that'd be quite a good way to kind of go through them. I mean, we've ticked off 4 now of the ones that she mentions, and it's definitely been interesting. I mean, the ending for me was a bit rushed in this one, and obviously, as I've mentioned a few times, I had big issues around them being closely related, but it was a book that, it was one of those weird ones where I finished and I thought, what the hell was that? But also when I was reading it, I was really invested. So it was like a weird mix of feelings for me. And I found it really hard to like pull my thoughts together when I like posted about my story graph and stuff. I was like, how do you even summarize this reading experience? Because it's not even about the book, it is the reading experience, and I think that was the most fascinating bit about it, and getting to talk through it with you has been really fun, because otherwise I'd just be like sit there on my own like, what have I read?
Right. When I finished it, I was almost in shock. I mean, I did finish it like, half an hour before we came on here. But like, I finished it and I was I honestly, like, in my head, I was like, how am I meant to, like you said, to get all these thoughts together? How do I put these into like a timeline? How do I get my ideas like to make one cohesive, thought in the book as a whole? Because I feel like each volume was so different that you could read each volume as like its own story, essentially.
And I think that's the interesting thing. Obviously, books aren't published in volumes anymore, but I can imagine being a reader at the time and actually wait, like if they were published as separate volumes, which they probably were, like waiting for that next bit, because the endings of each volume was quite a good cliffhanger. So I think she does that really well as the writer of the novel. Regina definitely keeps you interested, because it was like the end of a certain volume and they're like, oh, the Countess is dead. I was like, wait, what?
Yes, the endings really of the volumes were great. They were really you're right, good. Cliffhangers. They were really good.
Yeah, they were really good because they kind of wrapped up that section really nicely, but they still made you want to read on. So it was trying to like find that balance, because it wasn't like, oh, they've just chucked in a volume break here and it doesn't make any sense. It made really logical sense for the story, but it didn't make you feel like you wanted to keep going. You were like, oh, the next volume's there. So
what the hell's going to happen next?
Yeah, and you can see why Catherine and Isabella enjoy talking about it in Northanger, because it is definitely those ones that keep you hooked.
And that's the style that Austen adopted as well. She published hers as volumes, and I feel like that style of ending it in a way that makes sense, she does too. Like if you think about the transition, like when Elizabeth decides she's like going to go to Pemberley, and it's like it ends and it's like to Pemberley they would go, or something like that is like the last line before you then move into the next volume. And I think I felt that in this book too. There was good transitions between volumes.
It feels like reading, like, as if it would fit really nicely into, like, episodes of a TV show. Do you know what I mean? Like, this would be episode 1, this would be 2. And, I mean, Pride and Prejudice, the Colin Firth one from 1995, which they're now celebrating the anniversary of, aren't they, like, right now? That does that really well. That kind of captures those parts of the novel really well. But it definitely felt like the volumes were actually quite a good way to kind of frame the narrative, I think, for me, because it felt like I could then wrap my thoughts around like that crazy chunk that had just happened, and then I could kind of process that volume before moving on to the next one. And I actually wrote my notes in volumes because that made the most sense for me in terms of the way the plot kind of developed.
Yeah, no, I love that. I was the same as well. And then I broke it up into like parts because I was like, okay, I need to like formulate a timeline. But I agree. I think it's really good. And obviously this would have made so much sense for the time when you had circulating libraries. Like you said, that anticipation that you would have had, you would have got out volume 1. Then you'd be waiting for volume 2 to be returned back to the library so that you could then get it. Like there would be such an excitement. There would be something amazing about reading this. And what's so funny that you also mentioned about how it would fit for a TV show. I think this is the first one of this set that I've, out of the horrid novels that we've read, that when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I feel like this actually would make a really interesting, like this would be interesting on screen. This is the first one that I really felt that.
Yeah, because there was enough going on, whereas I feel like with Udolpho, there's a lot of Gothic elements, but there are a lot of in the background. But I feel like this one would actually make quite a good TV show or like film. I think it would actually be really entertaining. And you could definitely either kind of strengthen Madeline or play in and make it more comic. I think you could kind of go either way with her character. But no, I completely agree. I do think it felt like the easiest to do an adaptation on, I think, if you were going to do any. So if there's any filmmakers listening to this that want to make a kind of Gothic film, read Clermont and see what you make of it.
Yeah, I think so. I actually think it would lend itself so well into like a series or something. And this is actually what kind of upsets me slightly about, like Netflix and everything, that they keep remaking things that we already have good adaptations of. It's less for me about like, ruining what we already have, because I don't think that happens. By creating more, you don't ruin what's come before. You just add to the load, I suppose. But what upsets me is it's things like this that you just never get picked up, right? And there's potential
Yeah.
in stuff that's like disappeared into like the ethos over years. There's so much like good writing that would be so interesting to like see on screen, or even just like a compilation of like the everything that happens in the horrid novels, like the ones that we're reading. I feel like there could be such a good adaptation where it's like people compile the stories and like create something. And I suppose Northanger Abbey is the closest thing to that, but this is why we need a Northanger Abbey that's in a series, because I feel like they could lean into these books as well and get people interested in them. You know what I mean? Like someone like Regina could come back into like popularity if something like
Yeah.
someone if like a company like Netflix would pick it up, make Northanger Abbey and make it in a way that does what Jane Austen wanted to do, which is to push and promote these other authors. It's almost like she knew. She was like, you know what I mean? I've stood on the backs of these women. I've got over the fence. They haven't. In the best that I can do, like obviously she didn't know, but just like saying in like a prophetic sense, she's like, the best I can do is leave them in my book so that somehow I'm kind of giving them a helping hand over the fence as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that the novels are so interesting. And I think that that kind of thing, like I really like the movie they did in 2007 of Northanger Abbey. I think it's lovely, but it doesn't go into the Gothic very much. It kind of touches on it. And actually that's partly I think the main reason as well, obviously I've read Northanger Abbey a few times, but I think the main reason for me that Mysteries of Udolpho was always the one that stuck out in my head is because of Jane Austen Book Club. And I've read the book and I love the film. And in the film, Hugh Dancy's character, doesn't he? When he invites them round, he basically does a whole Udolpho thing. And they're all like, what do you mean you've read Udolpho? Because he's big into sci-fi. And I think for me, that was like that, actually, yeah, I do want to read these other books around. So I think Jane Austen Book Club did that brilliantly to kind of emphasise that element of Northanger Abbey and the novels that she mentioned. And like some Emma adaptations, like there's that big emphasis around Children of the Forest. And how Robert Martin won't read it, and they're like, how dare he not read that novel? So some of the novels are like adaptations are really good at kind of capturing those bits of context from the time that she puts in. But like you said, it'd be great to kind of have that emphasised a bit more. But that's the main reason that I was like, I know what Udolpho is because of Jane Austen Book Club, even though I'd read Northanger Abbey, because I think his character in that movie really focuses on that part a lot more than I'd seen other people do when talking about Northanger.
And I think with a series, a Northanger Abbey series, you'd have the space to do that as well, right? Something that I also
Yeah.
love about the 2007 one with like Felicity Jones, is when they have those like clouds where it's like those scenes where it's like Catherine's like put into one of the books and she's like in like drapey, like a white dress, and she's like running and it's like dark and there's like mist and everything. But I feel like we could have more of that actually,
Yeah.
where she's put more into the actual storylines. Like there could be moments, like she could be sat at the dinner table, we see a hand come out, and there could be loads of Easter eggs that we don't necessarily get in the book, but it's a way to showcase the books how Jane Austen did, if that makes sense. Like to celebrate them is by adding the elements of them. I mean, this would have to take somebody who's completely dedicated to making a really good Northanger Abbey adaptation, somebody who is willing to read all these books that we are, which that in itself, is the other challenge. But yeah, I think there's something to be said. Like that's why I love that we do this series, because I mean, I love doing it anyway with you. I find it like such a fun experience every year. But I just hope that it does encourage people to pick up some of the other books. Because I feel like that is testament to Jane Austen as well. It's like you put this in there. I feel like we have a responsibility maybe as a Jane Austen fan to be like, why did she put this in there? Because she was signaling to us, these books are worth reading. Like they're not, like don't let them be forgotten.
No, and she celebrates them as well. I mean, it is interesting that actually, obviously, we read The Monk a couple years ago, and the main person who pushes the monk is John Thorpe. And it kind of shows Jane Austen definitely has a different representation of the male Gothic to the female Gothic, because the female Gothic novels, like Anne Radcliffe and like Regina Maria Rush, that's spoken about by Catherine and Isabella, but the monk is really emphasised by John Thorpe. So it is interesting how there's that kind of gender dynamic again, because it was quite different. It was quite jarringly different. It was a lot more disturbing, I think, than these ones.
And again,
sure.
What it says about the characters, right? I feel like you know Austen better by reading her contemporaries. Like by reading The Monk, it just, like, we already know John Thorpe's this, like, awful, horrible character, but I think I saw him more as ridiculous. Now I've read The Monk, I'm like, this guy is probably a predator. Because, like, the fact that he, like, raves about it, and he's like, oh, no, like, you want to read The Monk? Like, The Monk's the book to read. And he's, like, in his, like, uni dorm, essentially, reading The Monk. I'm like, this guy is dangerous. Like, he's creepy, because The Monk is terrifying on many levels.
Yeah, and that's context that we wouldn't have had having not then gone and read it. And also, if people, like, obviously, not everyone would get on maybe with some of the kind of writing styles of those novels, and The Monk is quite disturbing. But if you want to understand more about it, you could just listen to the episode we did on it, because I think we did, hopefully, a not too chaotic summary. But again, it's quite a chaotic novel. So trying to summarise any of these Gothic novels is definitely sometimes a bit of a challenge for us.
It's so true. I feel like we really do try our best. I would really recommend this one, Clermont, by Regina Marie Roche. I really recommend reading this one. I found it easier than Udolpho. I think Castle of Wolfenbach's still my favourite. Martha, what's your favourite so far?
Yeah, I think I'd agree.
I love that one. It was good. It was good.
I think this one was, like, wilder than Castle of Wolfenbach and Mysteries of Udolpho, but definitely didn't reach the disturbing levels of The Monk. So it was kind of like a happy medium of Gothic. But it surprised me by how much Gothic came in after the first volume, because the first volume wasn't that Gothic, but it definitely grew, and I really liked that part.
I like some of the Gothic elements. I think were really well written as well. I think she's a great writer. And I think what I'm finding, actually, the ones that most people haven't read, like, I feel like Anne Radcliffe is still kind of slightly put on a pedestal for like 18th century Gothic women writers. Whereas honestly, when I'm reading the other ones, I'm enjoying some of the other women writers much more than I enjoyed Anne Radcliffe, and maybe that's personal preference, but I feel like for me, pace is important, and I really enjoyed this one. So I'm putting it out there. This is one to read, and hopefully we can get some more like publishing companies picking it up and putting it back out there. That would be awesome. This year also, I'm sorry, why has nobody come out with a Horrid Novels set? Like, why has that not happened this year? Why is it giving people are just like basic Austen fans, like, working in these industries? Like, no, come on, we need the detailed stuff. I want a hardback copy of all the Horrid Novels. That is what I want.
Yeah, we need, like, Persephone Books or someone to pick them up, because they love publishing those kinds of things.
I'm going to email them, because I went in to see if I could get it, because I was in Bath for the festival. So I went in to see if I could get this, and they don't have it. So I'm actually going to email them and say, like, oh, this is one that you should look at if you're looking for new books to publish, because I absolutely agree. Like, it'd be great if they could pick this one up. Yeah,
absolutely. And they like finding either kind of no longer in print or kind of more obscure female authors, and this is a great one.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. But that is everything from us today. Is there anything else, Martha, you want to add, or do you feel like we've done a good summary? I feel like that was concise for us. I'm proud of us.
For a very complicated novel, I think we did a very good job.
Agreed. Do you want to let everyone know where they can find you on Instagram and everything?
Yep, so I'm over on Instagram at Martha Bethan Reads, and I post a lot about romance and fantasy and Austen and classics and stuff. I've been over there for a little while now. This is our 4th episode doing spooky season, which I'm really glad you had me back for.
Of course. Honestly, Martha, I don't think there's anyone else I could ask to do this with me every year. Like, you are the committed reader that I needed for this whole project. So, so I really appreciate it that you pick these up every year, because they aren't always, like, this one was hard to find but easy to get through, and some of them are easy to find but hard to get through. So I feel like I said that the wrong way around, but you know what I mean. Like, some of them are a bit of a challenge to read, whereas this one was just a challenge to get hold of. But no, absolutely follow Martha, and then also go back and watch our other ones if you haven't, if you're not been following spooky season. There's so many more episodes you can go back to and listen to if you're going to reread Northanger Abbey this year. I feel like that's quite a good call. That is everything from us today, and I will see you in another episode. Perfect.